Warning: today's episode covers August Underground, a movie that is known for its disgusting, disturbing nature.
We'll be talking about themes such as gore, torture, and butt sniffing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Hello, found footage fans, and welcome to We Found a Tape. We're a podcast dedicated to all things found footage. Shaky cams, paranormal sightings, and everything with an authentic edge to make it all feel real. My name's John.
And I'm David.
And join us as we hit play and uncover what lies beyond the tape. Welcome everyone to another episode of We Found a Tape. As you know from the warning message at the beginning of this episode, today we're going to be discussing a depraved, sadistic, off-the-wall, gore-tastic found footage classic at the bottom of the found footage iceberg, all the way from 2001. We're talking August Underground.
We're talking mad butt sniffing.
Mad butt sniffing. Mad butt sniffing. Yeah, this was one that we decided to do mainly for the fact that it's closing in on the end of August, and that's really about it.
That's all we had. We were just like, John was, it's the end of August. Why not? Let's do it. Let's get it over with. And yeah, why not? We're here. We're coming up to the end of August. We're coming into September. Let's finish out August with August Underground, and let's look towards spooky season, right?
Yeah. And when I was, and this was the first time I'd watched this. Like I'd always been curious of it. I never saw it when it came out or made its rounds around, the internet back in the early 2000s, when a lot of people were looking up things like crack, like fucked.com and shit like that. Where people
rotten.com.
Rotten.com, yeah, that's another one. People were looking for like real life gore situations, and this kind of got thrown in the mix mainly because of the hyper realism, and there was a decision made to degrade this even more in the editing process. Is something I found out after the fact. But they shot it all on VHS, like mini DV, to make this look more degraded. I guess mainly because of what they had available at the time, right? I don't think there's anything other than like any sort of smart, specific reason other than that. But after the fact, I feel like they degraded it more to help with the special effects, because there's a lot of gore-tastic stuff happening in this one, and we're excited to talk about it.
The first few minutes was hard for me to watch, just because, not because of the obscene stuff. Yeah, that was hard to watch too, but it was just so grainy, right? It took me a good minute or two to get my focus on it, because it just looked like if somebody, when you smudge your finger on the window and everything just looks fuzzy behind it. It's kind of like that. Like, it just takes you a minute to focus, because even the worst of the worst, like any kind of found footage, when they're using like old style filming, this was worse than that. So it just took me a minute to focus. But I think once the boobs came into effect, that's where my focus came in, and that's where I was like locked in. I was like, okay, now I can see everything now. So we were good to go. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about this one. I'm disturbed, disgusted, and yeah, let's get into it. Before we dive into all of this stuff, John, let's hit him with that good old synopsis.
I'd be happy to, David. It's just another one I pre-made. So the main plot is that there is no main plot, so a synopsis can be quite hard, but I think I've found something that you'll enjoy, David.
Let's do it.
August Underground from 2001 gives viewers a front row seat into the depravity of two nameless killers. Shocking, disgusting, and grotesque, and that was just how the basement looked. Viewer discretion is strongly advised.
Strongly advised is a good, yeah. That's a good one. This one, so maybe it was about 7 years ago, or maybe six. I don't know, 6, 7 years ago. Someone mentioned it to me. I remember taking a look at it and skimming it through, but I didn't see the whole thing. Like I maybe saw, like I said, I skimmed through it. I was looking at it. Maybe from what I can remember, maybe it was just too grainy and I just had no interest in seeing it. So that's why I never, sat down and watched the thing through. But I had no idea there were 3 parts to this. I thought it was just August Underground. There's actually like a part 2 and a part 3. So I don't know if I'm interested going down that road.
I never saw it. This was a first time watch for me, so I'd never had any sort of interaction with it really. I just heard about it. It never was one. I just understood that it was going to be something that would be hard to find. Being from the UK, we had the whole video nasties phase, so I mean we're no stranger to banning films in the UK, but yeah, I just never really had any inkling to watch it. And I think now that I'm later in life, I guess I think it's definitely time I start to maybe visit some of these titles, and this was one that sort of piqued my interest maybe about 5 or 6 months ago. I was really curious on it. Then we ended up getting this very cool unearthed special edition Blu-ray of August Underground, and seeing it and holding it and sort of checking out like the pictures on the back and stuff, it just made me want to watch it even more. And what perfect time at the end of August to really dive into this. But I expected worse in the weirdest way. Like, this is not an easy watch, but I expected it to be a lot worse. But that's likely what Mordom and Penance is. They're probably like steps up in terms of ramping up the depravity, the violence, the realism that comes with that sort of stigma of August Underground. There's a lot of heavy gore films that are associated with this. Guinea Pig, that sort of thing. Twisted Vomit Dolls is another one that I've heard of. So it's not something I normally will lean into, but this in particular piqued my interest because of just the found footage element and the way that it's shot, the way that it's portrayed, and the fact that there's no real sort of plot or storyline kind of intrigued me.
We watched this together last night. I'm so glad I ate that meatball sub before we started this movie. Yeah, so as the movie started, I was finishing up a meatball sub from Subway, and when we got into the movie, I knew it was a gross movie, right? I just didn't know that there was going to be some gross parts where there was going to be like shit and pee and stuff like that. But I didn't expect to laugh at some parts either. So it was a surprising movie. It was very surprising. Yeah, I didn't know what to expect from it. So I just went into it very blindly. I didn't even remember what I saw from it, 5 or 6 years ago, 7 years ago, whenever I skimmed through it. So it was a whole new watch for me. I didn't remember anything from it. But yeah, this movie just starts out with no plot, no motive, no nothing. It just jumps right into, just two guys just fucking about, two crazy guys.
Yeah, that's really it. It kind of it's that sort of almost like early internet days. It almost felt like a vlog, like the early vlog videos that you would get where people were, using camcorders to document their lives as a family, document, what they were doing, and it just ramps it up. And Fred Vogel is the creative mind behind all of this, and it really just comes across as if it's a real sort of snuff film because of the degraded video that's used, but also the hyper realistic effects that he used. Like, he was trained in VFX, and he taught at the Tom Savini School in Pittsburgh or in Pennsylvania somewhere. He taught there, and I mean, kudos for that. Like, that, I think that's a huge thing, to make something look as if it's so realistic that people are like questioning their lives after watching it. I think that's pretty commendable, and really you only could have gotten away with that around that time. I think nowadays people are more clued in, people are more desensitized, but back in 2001, like, this just felt like some disgusting, depraved serial killers, like, hidden tapes that you've stumbled across, and you're hitching a ride with them as they go and do the most, like, insane shit. And to me, it kind of felt like, I don't know if you've ever seen Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, but it felt like that.
No, I've never seen it.
Nice. Yeah, it's decent. So it's a decent film. It's got Michael Rooker doing a bunch of Marvel films and things like that. Walking Dead.
I'm Mary Poppins, y'all.
Yeah, yeah. So it's got him. He plays Henry, and it's loosely based on true crime. But for me, it felt like Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer meets Jackass. Is kind of how I interpreted it. Yeah, it definitely holds a stigma going into it. And I mean, quite rightly so. It's an uncomfortable film to watch. There's a lot of very uncomfortable scenes in there. The first maybe 5 minutes is just straight up torture, depravity. Like you said, your eyes took a few minutes to adjust just because of the shaky DV cam and all the stuff that they've done to, like, make it as gritty as possible. I felt the same thing as well. It was definitely something that when you get down to that basement, it's just an instant, like, shock to your system. And I definitely feel like that was a planned way for them to be able to weed out those that are not truly there for that experience. If you get to that point and it's too much, that's your, like, warning to say, hey, I don't want to watch this anymore, and then kindly take the exit. But if you stick around, what you ultimately find is a sort of, early 2000s, like, dick joke, butt joke, fart joke, boys camaraderie that is actually entertaining. Like, there's never really a moment in this where you're not entertained. And yes, there's a lot of long scenes where there's just depraved acts and things like torture and fucking just gross stuff. And yeah, I think it is a juxtaposition. It's a weird confliction that you find in your mind where you're like, I should not be laughing here. I should not be laughing at this, but here we are.
Yeah. The points in the movie where, they had the girl tied up downstairs, one of her nipples were cut off. So she was missing a nipple. She's covered in blood. Mouth was taped at first. And they keep revisiting her back, because, at one point the main guy is, cutting up a body in the bathtub in the next room in the basement. And it's funny because, like, he's over there cutting it up, he's saying nonsense, and then all of a sudden he's just vomiting from the smell and cutting up the body. And apparently this girl knows the guy, right? Because they're like, oh, this is so and so. But the other guy in the other room behind the camera is kind of sick in his own way, right? Because there's a pot of shit right next to her on the floor. And at first, he grabs it with some paper, right? And he's like trying to get her to like eat it. He's smearing it on the part of the boob that is like cut off, and smearing it on her and stuff like that. That was already gross. What like made me like, ugh, like kind of like lean back is the next bit. He goes in full hand without the newspaper, tries to get her to eat it, and then he shoves it like down in her crotch area. He smears it on her ass, on the back, and things like that. And keep in mind, the shit smeared where it's smeared at. And here comes the other guy from the other room, comes in with the beer, cracks open the beer, and he kind of pours it on her a bit, pours it down her like in a pool in her crotch, and he gets down there and fucking drinks it, like he slurps it up. And it was gross because the other guy was just down there a second ago smearing shit. So I mean, there's a lot of gross things in this movie. It's just I'm so glad I ate that sandwich before we started.
Yeah, because there would have been your extra pepperoni right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Cut off nipples. Yeah, it was just like insanity, and then it cuts to like, there's points where they're just really just documenting, driving in the car and going up and down the street. They end up picking up a woman on the street that they were going to go and meet, and they end up attacking her. There's a moment where they go to the convenience store. They go to Jersey. They end up going to like a concert. They go to like a local band who are playing like Korn and Coal Chamber. It's like it's so good. And then they end up in a mosh pit, fighting, going there. They get kicked out, and like there's this whole confrontation, and he's just documenting the whole thing. And they end up at the convenience store, and again, it's like that for me. It's like that happy slap era, or like bum fights, where it's just like these outlandish, violent type interactions with the general public, and that's kind of where that comes from. It's definitely an influence from that, and also other things like Cannibal Holocaust, like that sort of hyper realism in terms of like the animal slaughter was one that they I feel like they were probably influenced by that as well, hence the depravity of some of the special effects. But they also end up at like an abattoir, or like a factory that processes meat, and they show you the area where they like skin the hide and like hang up animals and stuff like that. And I saw an interview with Fred Vogel talking about this, and he said that just sort of came up last minute, where they got the chance to go and film there. And he said he's thankful that the machine like wasn't actively like working at the time. Like everything was all cleaned and things like that, so it was clearly like an end of a shift or something like that. I think if that was there, I think that would have been truly unsettling, more than the gore that you see with the people being attacked. I think when animals are in there and in the mix, then that's when people start to really get pissed off and shut it off. And I think that would have just escalated it to fucking about 100 on the scale of just gore and brutality. And I think it would have really been probably a bad thing for the film, considering how violent it is and sort of degrading it is throughout. Like that's one that I think it would have been too much for the film, most definitely.
Yeah, for sure. Now that you say that really does make a lot of sense. Is that on the special features, or just an interview that you saw?
Yeah, it was just an interview I saw. Another thing I watched last night as well was a video on Fred Vogel's YouTube channel. and it's a behind the scenes sort of filming locations type sort of documentary type thing, where it shows you just where they filmed and tells you stories about it. So I really appreciated that, actually, like, because he goes into a bit more of detail into where they filmed this. Like, ultimately they filmed it at his parents' house in nowhere, Pennsylvania, and they filmed it in the basement, and they also had like a barn where they sort of start the film, where they come through and he's drinking the beer and he like breaks the glass and all that. So all of that stuff was in like a sort of family home of Fred's. His friend growing up, he mentioned he owns the convenience store, and so they were fortunate enough to film there. Here's a crazy fact, right, which kind of actually grosses me out a bit, is that the butt sniffers from the convenience store, that is Fred Vogel's brother and his cousin. So he was getting his brother to sniff his cousin's butt and vice versa.
Oh God. That's truly, keeping it in the family, I guess.
Exactly. The old woman that they attack in her home, and like, they take the beer and all that, and they bring out the false teeth and they're like gang, 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 gang. That is Fred's grandmother.
Oh no.
Yeah. she was like down for it. Like, I love that. I love when you've got a cool grandmother that's just down to do whatever it takes to get, like, to help out a grandson. That's just next level.
Not grandma.
Yeah. And he said, he was saying about how she was more than happy to do it, and he said that it was funny because he was able to get her to take out her dentures and show them all.
I think that's pretty common with old people and children. Like, if you go see your grandparents and they have dentures, they'll like pull them out just to like entertain a child. You know what I mean? They're like always down to pull out the dentures for the sake of entertaining a grandchild.
Yeah. Another crazy thing about the scene in the convenience store is that, and it's one thing I noticed when I was watching it, right, is the fact that when he's wrestling with the guy, which we now know is his brother, he actually smacked his head off the fridge door, and it broke the glass of the fridge door. I need to pay $600 to get it fixed.
Oh shit. That whole interaction was insane because the way that they shot it, he came in on 3 different occasions, right? So the first time, they're in there, just eating chips out of the bag, and tells them, are you going to pay for that? No, I'm not going to pay for it. We'll get out. And then, he's chasing around the camera guy. And that whole interaction was funny because the camera guy's just doing a cat and mouse game with the store clerk. Finally, they leave. Then the other guy comes back and he's like, oh, I'm so sorry about that. He's trying to pay him money for the inconvenience. And then you see the camera guy in the window throwing finger and, shit like that. And it just becomes a thing where, eventually it wasn't genuine, right? It wasn't a genuine apology because eventually he smacked the shit out of him. And then they were scuffling through the counter. And then he comes running out of the store again. And then they come back a third time. And that's where all that shit unfolds, where, he stabbed the clerk, and then they found the 2 people in the back, and they're having them do shit to each other. Who was the girl? Like, was there any relation? That was a cousin?
That was a cousin, yeah.
Okay, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was his brother and his cousin, and yeah, he would make them sniff each other's butts.
Wow.
It's funny as well because like it's a hard movie to explain to people like normally, and I can't imagine how difficult it would have been for him to explain to his family members and like friends that he was there filming with, like, this is the idea for the film, and it really stemmed from that culture of, you know, horror movies where you didn't really see it from the killer's perspective. The most prominent example is Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, like we mentioned. That's really one that outlines that, but it really stemmed from that. Fred Vogel was very much influenced by that and wanted to put that point across, and it comes across very front and center in the film. And but yeah, it was a wild ride throughout. There's really three main sections. It's almost like broke up into chapters, essentially, where we sort of start with depravity, then we move to sort of more mundane things of them, you know, going around and like doing like boy stuff, guy stuff, you know, pranking and
Right.
bullshit.
Yeah, it just reminds me of a vlog of like two dipshits just going off and doing things outside the box.
Right. Yeah. And I think that really adds to the realism, because just because of that sort of grainy camera, you can't really decipher what's real and what's not. And that's really the main point of the film. And there is no direct storyline, as we know. It's really just as if you found a tape, you know, in the street or in a trash can somewhere in Pennsylvania, and you've popped it in and you're watching the fucking whatever happened from some serial killer. And I think that's like the epitome of found footage. Like it really paved the way for that grotesque style of found footage, that like low tier of the iceberg for found footage, where it goes into those depraved acts. And it was really quite influential for that.
Yeah, it was one of those, like this movie, like it's hard for me to, like any other found footage movie we've done, to explain it, because, you know, usually there's a plot, you know, something to talk about, and it's just random things on a video. So it's kind of like throwing me off a bit to do this episode, because, you know, there's no real plot to talk about. It's just random, you know, stuff that's going on.
Most definitely, yeah. It is like an experience rather than like a set film. It's an experience, and it's not for everyone. I understand that, and definitely, if you're into that sort of thing, if you're into watching these hyper realistic gore type films, and you haven't seen it, I think it's worth checking out for sure. If that's not your bag and it's just found footage, I think definitely proceed with caution. This is one that it is tough to watch, and especially that closing like 20-30 minutes ish is really where it, for me, is the most uncomfortable. Like, I think up until that point, like, you know, we see them, the convenience store stuff happens, and then we go into, they're in like a comic book tattoo parlor, and Fred's getting a tattoo, and it's got two brothers in it, and then suddenly it cuts to these two brothers just being absolutely fucking terrorized in the same basement. They've clearly taken them. One of them's dead with his leg cut off, and the other one's just getting beat with a hammer. And
right,
there is no plot, right?
Right, there is no real plot, and it's kind of weird, because all these people, you know, they end up in this basement, but you never see how they get down there. So it's like, how do you get these bodies down there? How do you get them out of the car? You know, you're in a neighborhood, you know, how are you getting them in the house without nobody seeing or anything like that? And I think at one point, you know, when they left the concert after they had the interaction with the people outside and they got their asses kicked, and I thought it was funny because the bouncer was trying to help them, and the cameraman was just like, go fuck off, you know. He was like talking shit to the bouncer that basically saved their lives from getting their asses beat to death and shit. So it's just weird. I don't know. It's just like, you know, just a lot of random things on a video. And then the ending too, where they got the two party girls that come over and they're having a party with them, and it's just a long drawn out thing because they're partying with them, and it starts off like almost like a home porn video, right? Because they're dancing for him, they're stripping, they're switching girls back and forth, and then they each go into their own separate rooms with the girl, and then they end out with the guy coming downstairs after he was with the one girl upstairs looking for his buddy and the other girl, and didn't find him in the living room, goes down in the basement, and he has the girl bent over the coffee table, going to town on her, at the same time hitting her in the head with a hammer and shit, killing her. And then the other girl comes down the thing and sees what's going on. She tries to run, and they start chasing her out the door, and that's kind of like how the movie ends, that they're chasing that girl that got away. So don't know if she got away, don't know they caught her, but just seems to be a thing that they're into, and it's a common thing. So it's just a day in the life for him.
Yeah, and you never really know much about them either. You don't ever see the cameraman, which I found rather interesting.
Yeah.
You don't see, or you don't hear them give any names. So, but they don't wear masks, so it's clearly like a very brazen thing that they're doing here. They don't hide away from it. They don't shy away from it. They're it's a shit-filled, piss-soaked, vomit-inducing, violent sort of gore fest of hyper-realistic proportions that you're just there to experience, and that's really the main thing about this film. It's not a movie per se; it's an experience, and I think that's definitely something you need to take in going into this, because there's some stuff you may not like. You may get offended, you may feel sick, but you may also get entertained as well, which is weird to say. I felt very strange giving my rating on Letterboxd and leaving a comment and complimenting this, because it's meant to shock, it's meant to make people feel uneasy, and I'm here sitting giving it compliments, and it's a very strange feeling.
Yeah, I think with a movie like this, it's easy for people to be like, why did somebody make this? This is such a horrible, film to watch, and this and that. But I mean, if not to say that you have a sick sense of humor or anything like that, because I mean, in a way we do. But but I mean, if you stop and realize the creativity that went into it, and the reason it was made to shock and things like that, that's why you would appreciate the work that was put into it, not because of what it is, but the process that went into making it. So that's what I think. But yeah, I can see how somebody that went into this and didn't expect what to see, they've never heard of this movie, and just come out appalled and disgusted, and they're like, why was this made? This is such a horrible movie. Why isn't this being banned anywhere or anything like that? I don't know. It's everybody's got different flavors, so it's just different for everybody and how you perceive it.
Most definitely, and it's not an easy watch, mainly because of the filming style of it, and how degraded it is. Like we said before, it really hurts your eyes, and you kind of have to adjust to it. There's points throughout the film where it's not like that. It's not anywhere near as bad, especially with the unearthed release of it. I feel like there's definitely been some stuff that's been cleaned up and makes it a bit easier to watch. But yeah, just the subject matter is just intense, and for me, oddly nostalgic. I didn't grow up in the early 2000s in America, but I think me seeing this and seeing other films at that point in time makes me feel nostalgic to an era where things were a bit simpler. And I think, and Fred has said this really, that especially on the video I watched where they're talking about the locations, he's like, it's pure Americana, where the convenience store, and it's like a huge symbol for American culture. And as well, I think the inclusion of when they're at the club with like the band that's playing, and they're playing like Korn and Cold Chamber and like new metal. It's like that's also a nostalgic element as well, because that type of music was prominent then, and that's when it was really everything was starting to kick off into that, like I said, Jackass generation,
Right.
where everything was, a bit grittier, but it was, a time when a lot of people were just having a lot of fun, and that was highly creative. Like only a nutcase really could come up with the stuff that was in this film, and only someone that's insanely into horror films. And even then, like found footage wasn't really a thing, right? We had Blair Witch, which happened in like 99. They filmed this probably 2000, so there really wasn't any blueprint like we have now for found footage. So it's definitely a pioneer in terms of that extreme version of found footage, because we have extremely violent films, of course, and that is just our version, the found footage version of those extreme gore films and exploitation, ultimately.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I like the whole 2000. I mean, if they try to do a movie like that today, it wouldn't happen with so many cancer culture things, cancel culture things that go on today about, we can't say this, we can't do that. This movie wouldn't have stood with the times now today.
Totally. I agree 100%. I don't think this is a film that could be made now and have the same impact. I think everyone can sort of pick apart the gore, and the effects that were used, right? Like everyone's sort of desensitized to it now, mainly because of the events that have happened since that movie have come out. I mean, you can see beheadings on the TV, and bombings and like acts of terror throughout, and shootings and things like that. Like that's all happens way more often now than it did in terms of it being documented. There's cameras everywhere. Everyone has a camera in their pocket and can capture these experiences in such a way that it's just so intense. And for them to come up with a film like that and go through with it, and just the attention and care, which again, I'm conflicted in even saying that because of how depraved it is, and like really like it's just super uncomfortable to watch at points. And that last scene basically is like ingrained in my head. Like it's just always gonna live there rent free.
Definitely some spots in here that are just going to stick with me forever. And had I watched this, earlier in the day, I mean, this would have been something that I would have been, revisiting earlier, like maybe 5-10 years ago, because it had happened, right around the time. Because when this came out, I was probably a senior in high school. So, I mean, surprised I didn't hear about it then. But at that point, I was too busy partying, smoking a lot of weed and all kinds of stuff like that. So, although I was into movies at the time, I wasn't as heavily into them as I am now because I was too busy out partying. So,
yeah, no, that makes sense. And I was young. I mean, I was about 10 years old in 2001. So I was not watching August Underground. But yeah, I'd heard of it later in life. I never really took the steps to try and find it or watch it or whatever. But I am glad that I saw it. Like I really expected so much. The way that it's got that stigma to it, I feel like that stigma nowadays can be a little broken. I think there's way sicker, way more grotesque films that have been made since then, and this is like your entry level gore film especially for found footage, right? This is one that you'll be conflicted watching it, but I think at the end of the day, it's an interesting watch, and if you can get past the gore and realizing that it is just pure exploitation and it's not real, I think you'll find a nostalgic gem it fills a void in your aching heart for nostalgia.
Well said, sir. Well said.
But yeah, again, I don't know how many times I've said it, but just proceed with caution for sure. This isn't a recommendation per se. If you're interested in watching it, or if you've been interested in watching it, I would say give it a shot. If that's not your bag, I mean, there's no harm in that. It is tough. But full credit goes to Fred Vogel and his creative mind, his family who were with him throughout this thing, his friends, and another thing as well. Like when they were filming at the convenience store, they contacted the local police to let them know, like, hey, we're filming. Like, I guess just to make sure, because people will be screaming and shouting and all that, and like just to kind of give them a heads up. And apparently they were nice enough to send over a police officer who basically closed off the road and closed off the area so that no one could come and interrupt the filming, basically. And that's why, and again, something I noticed when watching it, like when they drive away from the convenience store after all of this, the violent acts and things, they're like, oh, it's the 5-0, and then the sirens go on and they start getting chased by a car, because that's a real cop who was there to patrol while they were filming, and he was again nice enough to flick the lights on and drive behind them a little bit so they could get some footage. And I mean, it's just like a local town boy making a horror film that turns out to be one of the most controversial ever made. That's probably a tough thing for him to explain to his friends, family, and people in the town, because it seems like a small town he comes from, right? And imagine trying to explain to people, like, hey, I'm making a horror film, but like it's grotesque and will bring a lot of controversy.
I'm curious to hear that in an interview, see how that went over with the town, family members, friends of family, you know.
Absolutely. Maybe one day we'll have a tape talks with Fred Vogel. We'll manifest that as well.
Yeah, we'll try and see if we can make that happen. That would be an interesting talk.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I really the only main points that I think go against it is, again, just the gore is a lot. It's excessive. There's no real plot, but there's not supposed to be. And I think that's where, like a lot of people are going to be offended by this, understandably. But I think we should rate it, David.
Yeah, I'm ready to go.
Hell yeah. I'll take it first, and I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it way more than I expected, and honestly, it's a film I probably would watch again. And I think that dictates whether or not it's, for me at least, a good film. It has its flaws, you know. It's the headache-inducing shakiness to it is a lot for some people, but when you get past that, there is like a nostalgic Americana to it that it definitely fills that void for people that are looking for those old, you know, simpler times. And there's a charm to it. There's funny moments that I didn't expect, and it was just a lot of fun to watch. Weirdly enough, I'm conflicted saying it. The end portion is definitely going to stick with me. That long scene with them, you know, with the ladies of the evening were intense as well. There's a lot of gratuitous stuff going on, and it fit the theme of the film. But for that, I think I'm going to give it a 3 tapes. yeah, definitely would watch again. It's not any I'm going to recommend to people. I think if you are curious on it, let us know. I would love to know if you've seen this or if you're curious on seeing it. So let's get the conversation going.
What an interesting conversation it would be. But yeah, I'm there with you on the three tapes thing. For me personally, not something I would go out of my way to watch again. If you had told me let's watch 2 and 3, I'll watch it with you. But I mean, it's not something I'm going to go out of my way to go check out. Not something I would recommend either. It's just something like if you've watched this episode, you want to talk about it, you've seen it, you're interested, you're intrigued by what we talked about here, just to go and explore, then by all means go for it. But overall, it didn't really have any storyline to it. It was just a bunch of shocking stuff, and that's all it was made for, just to shock you, disgust you, and put some things in your mind that, like, there's some sick people out in this world, that have actually probably done this, because ideas come from somewhere, they just don't come out of the blue. You've either seen it from somebody, or something that has been created in your brain or executed out. But yeah, the 3 tape for me rating is what I'm going with. Now, being that I watched our first episode, which was Cannibal Holocaust, that was a different thing because that involved rape scenes. That's what shocks me and it disturbs me. If it's with children, like Megan is missing, or just in general rape, because it's just an uncomfortable situation for me personally. So although it was implied here in this movie, it really wasn't any acts that were pulled out. So like visual acts of rape. So I mean, it didn't like disturb me like that. I don't recommend watching it if you have motion sickness. There are some points there. I definitely don't recommend eating beforehand or during this movie, especially if you got a queasy stomach. If you do have a queasy stomach, there's going to be some things in here that are going to shock you and probably make you nauseous and maybe even vomit, depending on how strong your stomach is. Apparently my stomach is pretty strong because I ate a sandwich before I watched this movie, and I'm still here. No vomit came out of me, so we're all good.
You had Subway before and you lived to tell the tale.
Yes, indeedy. And then no marinara sauce came out.
Exactly. But there was probably a lot of marinara sauce in the making of this film.
I wonder if they got it from Subway.
Yeah, well, eat fresh, eat Subway. Yeah, a pretty high score, a higher score than I was expecting. I'll be honest. I've seen some interviews with Fred. Fred seems like the nicest guy ever. And a quick anecdote before we round out today's episode is that when Fred was coming to Canada for a convention, he was stopped at the Canadian border and charged with obscenity because he had copies of these movies in his possession, because he was going to a convention. He was going to sell them. And when he was crossing the border, they were interviewing him. They saw the things that he had in his car or in his bag or whatever, and they detained him for hours, and they ultimately charged him with obscenity. The charges were ultimately dropped, but it just goes to show that what he made was truly out of this world, not fit for general consumption.
Not for general consumption.
Exactly. But yeah, thank you everyone for sticking around and listening to this episode. Let us know in the comments if you have seen August Underground. What are your thoughts? Are you one that is in the camp that this is actually a good film? Did you hate it? Did you love it? We'd love to know about it in the comments. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at We Found a Tape, along with on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Podcasts.
And don't forget, be kind and rewind. We'll see you next time.